So yeah, my name is Eduardo Figueroa. I'm working with Ivan Kalberg at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center, and my research project was called Building an Intuitive and Interactive Dashboard for HuBMAP to Facilitate Data Access and Improve Fairness. So it's a lot of things. I'm gonna try and talk a bit more and explain a bit of those words, but starting about the outline, we're gonna go first with the objectives of this internship, of this project. Going talking about a bit of HuBMAP, increasing opportunities in making informed decisions, conclusion, future directions, acknowledgement, reference, and questions. So starting with the keywords. So stakeholders, in this case, we're looking at it as making tools, making, in this case, a view for a specific person. In this case, could be a user, could be a data creator, uh, could be a PI. Each one would have different things depending on the stakeholder and the information they deem necessary or informative. In this case, statements, we are referring to a sentence that has a question in it. And then metrics would be the result of that question. Dashboard would be a view of different metrics. For example, could be like in your car with different graphics explaining different things in an easier way. And then tagging, it's mostly like represents a field and who in this case would be responsible to take care of it. I'll talk more in detail about it. If we are going to talk about the objectives, in this case, first making statements for stakeholders. The other one is making statements for evaluating fairness. The other one is defining stakeholders with different access levels, designing automatic fields tagging, and displaying an interactive dashboard. So most of you already know about HuBMAP, but just a little overview. In this case, the idea is to have a baseline, a standard system that can have access to different cellular atlas of the human body, keyword being standard, and having access to everybody. The idea is that it's a center that everybody can have access to, not only uploading information, but also using the tools to work with the data. There's different organs or different labs uploading information. And the idea is to have it organized in a standard way that everybody can use it, can upload the information, and it's easy to use. But in this case, there's a lot of data, a lot of information being uploaded. In this case, we're talking about the tissue mapping center. This is a graphic representing those labs that are uploading information in this specific tissue mapping. In this case, these are the top ones. So there's right now about 2,000 data sets been public, and there's more being in the process. But the idea is that every one of these data sets has to comply with the fairness guide. And fairness, you're gonna see it, it's very important in this case, is a standard to make sure that everybody has access to it. Everybody has a baseline of what information they need to upload, how it needs to be uploaded. If the metadata is complete or not, it's also an important part. We also need that everything is accessible, including the tools being used and the results of this work, and also the methods. In this case, we're talking, as I already mentioned, the format needs to be specific, needs to be complete. The information, public access, these are all elements very important for for fairness. And this is what the HuBMAP is based on. In this case, I already mentioned that there's a lot of information being uploaded here. So the donors, there's 2,028 donors at this moment. Dataset 2020, 2,266 datasets, and a lot more information here. And the thing is that we want to make sure that there's a lot of information, but we want to make sure that the fairness and that principle is still being acknowledged, and a way to view it more easily and more just be presented, and don't have to do a lot more information or more work to get to it. In that way, we want to amplify the information that we have. So in this case, we want to add functions to make a more informed decision. This is the portal now. So there's information, relevant information here. And the idea is to add information to it using the same access we have, all the open access that we have to this information. Make it in a way that it's easier to everybody not only see it, but interact with it. In this case, now Dashboard complies with the findable and accessible part. We want to make sure that it's also usable and interoperable. And then we go to the part of functions we want to add. This is the objective. This is the first one. So we have the pipeline of what we have. We want to go work with general metrics. In this case, this represents the information that is for how many data sets we have, how many assays we have, how many organs we have, how many labs have uploaded information. That type of information that it is important, but it's not necessarily pair related, but it's still important to us as a user and as a working with that information as data creators. It's also important to have. In this case, we have the general metrics, and then we will decide if it's something public. It will go to the assay assessment view, that you don't have to have an account to it. If it's something more relevant but more deep down, maybe using private information or information not being completed, then it will go to the self-assessment view. It is more for the working data sets and need a bit more work. In this case, we are talking about the process and the pipeline of how we get there. We're first making a statement of what information we think it's useful. Then we code it. Then we can either code it at the moment, or we can see if there's another way that we can make that information more useful. Then if you need to modify it, then do a JSON to have that information and format it completely, and then reevaluate. Is this information now that is modified is actually being useful? Can give us more information? No. If it's not, then we remove the metric. If it is, then we decided if it's something it needs to be public or private. And that way, that's the way we assess the metrics that we were making. How we did it, and we use it for data. We use the HuBMAP part with the portal. We were using on-demand, and with on-demand, we had access to Bridges Soup. In this case, we decided to go with Grafana because as all the other things here are open source, and that's a part that needs to be complied in all of the part of the project, that everything needs to be open source and accessible. And we use Python for this, the files that we actually needed to modify for the data. And then these are the graphics that we had. This is the assessment view. So this is the public one. And we have all this information is the one being published. So we have the data sets, we have primary data sets, we have derived data sets that are the one that been If the primary set has been modified and the derived data set is how it's being categorized. We also divide it by labs, by organs, by assays. This is just a snapshot of the graphics that we did and the representation of the metrics. In this case, this is the self-assessment view. In this case, these are the general part. So it includes the public and the private data. So this is the data we're working with at the moment. And the idea is to have a general overview of everything that we have and how we can distribute it. And every information that as a team, as a data curator, it's thought to be important and to be easy to modify or it needed some change. In this case, if there's some information missing, then we have a small flag to know what is missing and determining all the data sets related to it and already want information to each data set to then contact and be more direct with the information we have. These are another view of the self-assessment. In this case, we were looking at the quarters by year. That way we can present that information. It's something definitely more relevant for the data curator or the PI working with this project. That way, what information is published, how long it takes to be published. That information is the things that we were looking for in this case. Now, the other part, we finished that first part of the project and then we started another one. This one, it was more one of the milestones that were assigned to the Hive, and we were then working with it and trying to assess and help making this as easy and as interesting as possible in the way that we get to a solution. In this case, tagging is what we are looking for. So tagging, the idea is to also put it on the dashboard. So we were talking to the decorators and determine if tagging could be done manually or could be done automatically. There's a big point to determine. The idea of tagging is that we can assess if the information that we need is from specific part of the project, if it's the provider or any specific group, and then assign that task to them. And this way we are determining if it's something that can be automatic, we then can assign it by default and then talk to them. Or if we need to be assessed, well, that's less work for the data creators to do, because they have been doing this for all the 2,000 data sets by hand, and the idea is to simplify that part. So in this case, we're working with a empty directory. So this is already working, and the idea is that it can be determined if it's an empty directory, there's a function for it, and then assigned to it as accordingly. Then the other part that we're working with is the also evaluation, but in this case is more for the fairness metrics. The idea is to have an idea of how fair is the system and how we can make it better, how we can make sure everything is according to the fairness guide, or if we need to adapt in this case. In this part, we were looking at different papers and comparing each one and trying to get like a general idea of what different papers are viewing as fairness, as a fair principle. And then in our case, look at it and see if it applies to us, to the system that we have. If not, eliminate the part or see if we can modify it to actually be one of our criteria. If one criteria we needed and is not part of that baseline, then add it and start. In that part, we would have the statement. The idea is to do a metric and how we can get it to a number or a graphic to make it visual and see how we can change it. And in this case, this is the conclusion. We have the idea, the first part was to add fair metric to the system, making sure that it is interoperable and reusable. We have in the interoperable part, is accessible by different devices, and the reusable part, it can also be accessed by the API, and everybody that has access to it can also do these metrics and other ones if it's finds more things to do. And then in the milestones part, we're looking at the Hive, and the project that we did also it's aligned with the milestones that are from Hive, going with the community involvement. We have the public dashboard and the assessment view for it. In the innovative tools, we have the self-assessment view and the data metrics, the general metrics, and the fair metrics. In future directions, our plan is to go more towards making the dashboard public. After it's been public, gathering feedback from it, and make sure that if there's something that we should add, or if there's something that we can remove or make some changes, that's a whole part. Then we are also looking at the long term, making sure that we finish up with the fairness metrics and adding these metrics to the dashboard. We also want to make sure that the experience is better. So if there's something else going from graphics, how we can view it, that's also part of the project. And we also want to make sure that ideally, right, and our experience of making this the evaluation metric for the HuBMAP, and what was the process like, and what was our reasoning to add or remove some metrics. Now in the acknowledge part, I would like to acknowledge and give my thanks to HuBMAP and NIH for this experience, the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center and CMU for this experience to having me here, and all the things that I get to know and experience here. And the reference part, the papers that we use from HuBMAP to understand the system, and from different fairness groups that actually did something similar, and we're using it as a baseline. Any questions?